The soft tapping sounded like someone sending a signal. Zubia sat upright in her small apartment, her eyes fixed on the blank, white wall opposite her. The nose had started an hour ago faint and irregular at first, but now it followed a pattern, like a coded message. She stared at the wall with a strange expression, a mix of curiosity and unease. This wall separated her apartment from the one next door, which had been vacant for months. She had seen the landlord last week, confirming no one had rented it yet. Could it be rats? She whispered to herself. But the sound was too deliberate, too human. Zubia reached for her phone, her fingers hovering over the screen. Should she call someone, the police perhaps? But what would she say? "Hi, I think my wall is tapping at me." She shook her head, deciding against it. Instead, she tiptoed closer to the wall, pressing her ear against its cool surface. The tapping stopped. For a moment, there was only silence. Then knock, knock, knock. 3 sharp raps echoed through the wall, making her jump back. "Who's there?" Zubia called out, her voice trembling. There was no reply. She waited, heart pounding, until the silence grew unbearable. Gathering her courage, she knocked back 3 times, mimicking the rhythm. Immediately the taps returned, faster this time, almost frantic. Something about the urgency sent a chill down her spine. This wasn't random. Someone or something was trying to communicate. The next morning, Zubia couldn't shake the events of the night. Exhausted but determined, she decided to investigate. She knocked on the door of the vacant apartment next door. To her surprise, it creaked open. "Hello?" she called, stepping cautiously inside. The air smelled stale, and the curtains were drawn, plunging the room into shadows. The apartment was empty, except for one thing. A piece of paper lying on the floor. Zubia picked it up. Scribbled in hurried handwriting were the words, "Help me, I'm trapped." Her breath hitched. Was this a joke? But as she examined the paper, she noticed something odd. There were smudges of what looked like dried blood on the edges. Suddenly, the tapping began again, louder than ever. It was coming from the far wall, the one adjacent to her apartment. Zubia's hands shook as she approached. "Who's there?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. This time a voice answered, muffled but clear enough. "Please help me." Zubia ran to the landlord, demanding to know if anyone had access to the empty apartment. The old man scratched his head. "No one's been in there since the last tenant moved out 6 months ago," he said. "They left in a hurry, didn't even take their things. Strange folks, always muttering about the walls." She returned to her apartment, her mind racing. That night the tapping grew relentless. She couldn't sleep, the sound drilling into her nerves. By morning, she had made a decision. If the landlord wouldn't help, she'd find out what was behind the wall herself. Armed with a hammer, Zubia approached the wall. Each swing set plaster flying, her fear overridden by a desperate need for answers. After an hour of work, she broke through. Behind the wall was a narrow crawl space, and within it, she found a figure curled up, a woman, pale and trembling, her clothes torn and her eyes wide with terror. "Oh my God," Zubia whispered. "You're real." The woman nodded weakly. "They trapped me here," she rasped. "I've been trying to signal for so long." Zubia helped her out, calling an ambulance and the police. As they carried the woman away, she clutched Zubia's hand. "Thank you," she whispered. "You saved me." But even as the woman disappeared down the hallway, Zubia couldn't shake the feeling that something still wasn't right. That night, as she lay in bed, she heard it again, the soft, rhythmic tapping. Only this time, it was coming from a different wall, and it was louder.